Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to WeRSC's Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion. WeRSC columnists, staff writers, and editorial board. We first start with the pregame show, where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and then give you the latest USC Trojans football news. First, let's meet this week's panelists. Marc Kulkin, WeRSC columnist who writes the Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, Sunday Takeaways, in addition to the regular season football and basketball practice reports. Chris Arledge, former William Jewell College defensive back and team captain, and WeRSC columnist who writes the popular column Musings with Arledge. Erik McKinney, publisher and editor-in-chief of WeRSC.com, and Greg Katz, that's me, your host and moderator of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and a weekly WeRSC columnist who writes the obvious and not so obvious NIMHO Sunday. Before we kick off this edition of the Trojans Huddle, here's the latest USC football news. This Saturday at noon in the Coliseum, the USC Trojans will conclude spring ball with the annual spring game, which will be free and open to the general public and televised live on ESPN nationally. The spring game will be one half of a football game, and according to head coach Lincoln Riley, quote, "It won't be a game of tag. We're going to play football." Again, that spring game will start at noon Pacific time. After Saturday morning's practice, Lincoln Riley was asked about the progress of the offensive line, and he said because of their previous game experience, we can have a great offensive line really, really quickly. This past Friday, former Trojans wide receiver Drake London performed his own pro day for NFL scouts. Although he didn't run the 40-yard dash, London did perform in other individual drills and looked sharp. Some national media experts are saying that London could be the first wide receiver off the board and be a top 10 pick. Former USC safety linebacker Kulana Makala has transferred to Hawaii. Also on the transfer front, former Trojans quarterback JT Daniels and former Trojans offensive coordinator Graham Harrell will reunite in their football responsibilities, as Daniels announced last week that he's transferring to West Virginia, where Harrell is the first-year offensive coordinator. Both, of course, were previously together at USC in the year 2019. And speaking of USC former quarterbacks, it's possible 3 former starting Cardinal and Gold quarterbacks could be starting for other universities in 2022 when you consider JT Daniels at West Virginia, Keaton Slovis at Pittsburgh, and Jackson Dart at Mississippi. And there's a strong possibility that Slovis and Daniels will face each other in the backyard brawl when West Virginia plays at Pitt to open their season on September 1st in Heinz Field. And finally, friends, WeRSC's Inside the Trojans Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and leadership and listenership. We appreciate and encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click the red subscriber and like buttons. It's greatly appreciated, and it's free. All right, it's time for the opening kickoff. And our first quarter question, panel. The spring game is this Saturday in the Coliseum. What specific players and areas of interest on offense will you be scrutinizing the most? Our leadoff hitter, as always, Marc Kulkin. What are you looking forward to, and who are you looking forward to looking at on offense?
Besides the obvious, quarterback Caleb Williams and Miller Moss, being able to look forward to a good play caller, and the run game. So basically everything across the board is what I'm gonna have my eye on. But, Lincoln Riley talked about the offensive line, and he was in a really good mood following Saturday's practice. So he must have saw something that, really put him in that really good mood, because he wanted to talk to the media long after Katie Ryan was willing to cut him loose. So behind the starters, the experience, he mentioned a couple of the younger guys. So eventually those guys are going to get plugged in. We're going to see, what does Maximus Gibbs look like? What is Mason Murphy looking like? What is Andrew Milek looking like? What's Jason Rodriguez looking like? Are we at the point now where Lincoln can, adjust his roster personnel and say, all right, you know what, maybe I don't need to go get 3 or 4 more offensive line guys. I can now look at going to get some other guys to fill other holes. So if that offensive line looks good and the run game looks good, and the quarterback looks good, which I think they will. Um, I think Lincoln Riley is going to be able to focus on other parts of the roster that need more attention. I don't think offense is where it's at.
Chris Arledge, is offense where it's at? And who are you looking at? And what areas of the offense do you probably scrutinize?
I mean, offense is going to be where it's at this year for USC, I think. I think Mark talked about every position group other than wide receiver. So I guess I'll talk about wide receiver. And USC has, for a number of years now, it seems like every year has had at least one superstar wide receiver. I'm curious who that's going to be this year. I'd keep an eye on Brendan Rice to see whether he's going to be that guy. Or whether or not Caleb Williams' teammate from OU is going to be that guy. But somebody's going to need to step up there. Lincoln Riley's scheme will open some things up. The running game will open up play action. I think he's going to do a better job than Graham Harrell at actually scheming people open. So I don't know that you have to have a Drake London to be successful. But it certainly does help to have a go-to guy that the other team can't cover. So that's what I'm going to be looking at in addition to the obvious ones. I mean, everybody's going to be looking at Caleb Williams because if USC is going to be good enough to win the conference this year, and I think they have a chance to do that, it's because Caleb Williams is going to be Superman. So everybody's going to want to see what he has to offer. But yeah, I'll be curious to see what wide receivers step up.
Eric, what about you? What are you going to be looking at?
You guys both mentioned it, but just jumped over the right. It's Caleb Williams and Caleb Williams again. That's what needs to drive this thing forward, I think. And that's speaking from I guess a USC fan's perspective. He was the most talked about player in the transfer portal, probably in all of college football this offseason. He has to make all of this right. Lincoln Riley coming over, everything that USC did, I think really relies on how he plays. Now, as someone who covers the team and kind of would love to see Miller Moss do well, and would love to see kind of some of the backups that Mark mentioned, that those guys are going to be really interesting to watch too. Out front, though, it's absolutely Caleb Williams. Going behind him, I think it's a scheme. What does this offense look like? How does this set up this? And Chris talked about that too, but what does the movement look like? How open are guys? What is the feel, I guess, of the offense? And again, this goes right back into Caleb Williams. How significantly, I guess, is it clicking at this stage in the process? They're going to have all summer, all the PRPs, all the time spent together, still fall camp. You still have a lot that you can do. But at this point in this process, what does this offense feel like when it goes out on the field? Are guys running into each other? Is it kind of stops and starts? Is the offensive line working with the running backs? How are the tight ends working in there? All of that, what's kind of the harmony that you can feel from that offense on Saturday? But it's what does Caleb Williams do? That, I think, is going to be, when you read the headlines and all of that coming out at the end of this, a lot of it, I think, is going to focus on Caleb Williams' performance.
All right. Well, I'm going to take a different viewpoint on some of this. I am curious, first of all, to see Miller Moss and see how he fits into the offense. I know what Caleb Williams will do. I saw what he did last year. I've watched film on their offense. I'm not overly excited in terms of what is the scheme going to look like. I know what the scheme is going to look like. I watched plenty of Oklahoma film. What I'm interested about the scheme is I want to see how the offensive line has adjusted to the scheme. Are they fast enough and quick enough to run that kind of counter tray that they run with an offset back? I want to see Cortland Ford pull out. I want to see Andrew Voorhees. I want to see him pull out and trap. I want to see how these guys get upfield, can get up to the second level. I want to see their athletic movement, which I don't think we got to see their best in the last several years under the Clay Helton system. I think that's going to be one thing I'm going to look at. I'm really excited to see Austin Jones run. He's been getting a lot of good positive pub. I know what Travis Dye can do. So there's a good point to me, is that I know that Austin Jones, I also think, again, I want to see the tight ends in motion. I want to see what they do, how they turn up. Are they really going to be H-backs if that's what they're going to turn them into? And I agree with Chris. I'm interested to see the wide receivers, especially Brendan Rice. Poor guy was stuck in an abyss in the offense of Colorado. And it'll be interesting to see how he gets through and progresses. I know Mario Williams is going to look good. And Gary Bryant hopefully will be healthy and he can play. So it'll be interesting. I want to see a log jam at wide receiver. And I want to see who's going to catch the ball with fans in the stands. I want to see who's going to catch the ball with ESPN cameras on them. So there'll be a little bit of intrigue there for me. So all in all, I think offense has plenty to look at. And I think we've all got probably our own particular facets of what we want to see. And just to remind fans, next week we're going to review the spring game for all of you, both on offense and defense. And I'm sure that we'll all have different viewpoints on how that goes. So with that in mind, let's turn to defense. And we begin with this question, of course. What specific players and areas of interest on defense will you scrutinize the most? Erik, what are you going to be looking at on defense?
For me, Shane Lee is right at the top. He's a guy right in the middle and a guy that we have heard so much about this spring. If his play can even come close to approaching kind of how important he's been off the field and kind of developing players around him, that would be huge. But USC needs that guy in the middle. They need a guy in the middle of the defense, kind of take control, captain things, and make plays, bring a physical presence there. And then it's up front for me, what the defensive line does. I think you've got a couple new guys in there. Tyrone Taleni has been getting a lot of praise lately. Is he a guy that can make a huge jump from not playing football to playing very little football at Kansas State to now potentially pushing for a starting spot this year? Kind of as crazy as that sounds. Is he a guy who fits in? Seeing Thule up there again will be fun, and Nick Figueroa, those guys. But what does that defensive line look like? Because again, what we've been hearing lately is, yeah, the offensive line is getting better and better and doing some good things, and they really like that. I think the defensive line needs to stand up. And I didn't mention, I'm going to see if somebody else wants to jump in on the secondary, but that secondary was the guys who played last year, and you look at the numbers and the stats and all of that, that's got to get better. That's got to get better in a hurry. But for me, I want to see kind of the tone set up there in that front seven and see Shane Lee run around a little bit and see what he can bring.
Okay. What do you expect to be happening as far as bringing it, Marc Kulkin? Who are you looking at? What units? You excited about the defense in general from what you can ascertain?
Yeah, no, I want to see who's flying around. And, Erik already touched on Shane Lee. He's been the center of attention, where the culture is changing on that side of the ball, if not in the locker room completely. So on either to the right or the left of Shane Lee is going to be a rush end. And whether that's going to be Corey Foreman, whether that's going to be Romello Height, whether Solo finds a spot, is it going to be inside or is it going to be outside on the defensive line? That's where I'm going to be keen, because USC, you can't just get close to the quarterback. You got to be able to get to the quarterback, get the sacks, create some turnovers, force some chaos back there. So at that level, yeah, we need somebody who's ready to step up and, in Corey Foreman's case, be that number one defensive player in the country that chose USC. I know Chris is going to go heavy. I'm assuming Chris will go heavy with the DBs, but you got Kalen Bullock back there. He's going to cover up a lot of inexperience that USC might have on the edges at cornerback. So is Josh Jackson ready to step up? Is Damani Jackson going to be thrust into a starter's role? So we'll see where we go there. Defense is definitely where you can focus on the entire defense, and you're not going to be like, oh, I missed something. You're focusing on something that needs to be focused on. For me, that's the difference between the offense. Like you said, Greg, I think the offense, it's going to be prolific. Defense is where we need to shore everything up.
That you have been very, how shall I put it, with the defense for a good reason. You're a former defensive back yourself in college. Is it the secondary you're looking at first, or are you going to work inside out with the front four and then work your way back to the secondary? What are you looking for?
I'm not going to talk about the secondary at all. I don't know what Mark is talking about. I'm going to look.
Okay, just for the record, we're into it 15 minutes, and Chris is now officially raring to go. Sorry, Mark, you had to take the brunt of it. Got him off.
You know what? I got thick skin.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why Kulkin is trying to steal my thunder and talk about what I'm going to be talking about. I didn't share notes with him. I just don't understand it, but that's fine. No, look, if there are two guys on the roster that everybody's interested in, it's Caleb Williams and Corey Foreman. Everybody wants to know what Corey Foreman's going to be. So I don't want to talk a ton about him because we talk about him every week. Everybody wants to know if this guy's going to be the superstar we all expected. We'll see. I think that Eric's right. I think it's in the middle of the defense. I want to see what Shane Lee can do. I want to see if he's half as good a player as he is a leader, but I also want to see who else is going to be there with him. I mean, the coaches had good things to say about Ralen Goforth the other day. That was good to see because we haven't seen a lot from him. We've seen him play a lot, but we haven't seen a lot from him. If he's now becoming the guy that we hoped he would be coming out of high school, that's good news. I want to see what Rayshawn Davis can do. But the reality is that last year's USC defense was maybe the worst USC defense of all time. And so we're going to need to see substantial improvement in lots of areas. And I think we will, but I think we're going to see it against a pretty good offense. So if these guys can make plays, if they can be competitive, that's going to be a pretty good sign. But I want to see what the linebackers can do because we haven't had good linebacker play in many, many years now, and we're going to need that.
Okay, I'm going to take a similar route, but be specific in my view on it. I know he can do. Obviously, he's a great leader. He was one of the top linebackers recruited in the country out of the Baltimore area. What I want to see him do is what happens when he drops back into pass defense. I want to see how he covers his lateral movement. Some claim, true or false, that's probably an area he needs to really work on. But I want to see it for myself. Yeah, I'm a little bit tired of the Foreman every week thing, but it is a worthy topic. And you know, I thought Roy Manning, the outside linebackers coach, quote, edge rusher, mentor for all these guys, said, you know, first we got to get the players in the right position. And, you know, we always were wondering what position is Corey Foreman. We saw what a disaster Drake Jackson, in my opinion, was. Didn't know if he was rushing, what he's dropping back, guarding grass, what have you. So he's saying good things about Corey, that he thinks he's in the right spot, which of course we all know that in order to have a good team, the players have to be in their right positions. If you use a basketball terminology, you can't have a center shooting 3-point shots and a guard posting up down low. I think that I'm excited about that rush end position, especially to the poo-poo. It looks as though he's healthy. It looks as though he's got Manning's attention. He's excited about this kid. You know, he's a player I can root for because he's gone through so much adversity. That wouldn't it be something if he doesn't end up at rush, maybe he's going to end up as a down lineman. If he can just be healthy, he's really going to help this team. So that's, you know, I think that Romello is somebody that I'm looking forward to. I want to see Taleni. Taleni, when I watch him on interviews, seems very mature to me, very coachable, and very young to the game. He played rugby when he was back in Samoa. And I think that he's somebody that I want to look at. As far as the secondary goes, I'm curious to see who the defensive backs are going to be, the corners. I want to see, you know, I know McCutcheon's probably going to be one of them, but Blackman, correct me, Blackman will be one of them. I don't know who the other one's going to be. I think that the safeties are going to be interesting to me, but you know, the thing that they've been really emphasizing, and you've seen this on video, is get to the ball, run to the ball, play with high energy. But the biggest key to me out of all of it is how is their tackling improved? Are they tackling better? Are they coming as a group? Is it, I'm going to miss a one-on-one tackle? That seems to be kind of like behind the curtain, and I think it should be in the forefront. So I'm looking to see how they tackle as well. All righty. Let's go to halftime here. And halftime, I think we've transitioned to a halftime with a pretty good question. Given that the spring game is at the Coliseum and it'll be free to the general public and televised on ESPN at noon Pacific time, what will be the attendance count, panel, in your opinion, and why? And is this a good decision by Athletic Director Mike Bohn to make the game free and on ESPN Live televising it? Chris, what do you think?
First of all, I think it's a great decision. I mean, to get in front of a national audience, to have people see what USC is up to, and have what's likely to be a hour and a half long USC infomercial on ESPN is a pretty good deal, right? Because that's what it's going to be. The ESPN guys are going to be talking about Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams and the changed culture. So yeah, great idea. I also think it's a good idea to do what he's doing, where you make it free and you have a bunch of other activities and other things to draw people in. You don't want to have this thing televised on ESPN and have 600 people show up. That being said, I'd be surprised if they got more than 20,000. I mean, even in Pete Carroll's heyday, when the Coliseum was being sold out for just about every big game, he's still probably getting 15, 20,000 at the spring game. I mean, it was hard to know for sure, but that's what it looked like to me when I would go. I don't think they're going to do any better than that. If they do, that's great. But I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good opportunity. And I'm looking, and the fact that practice is closed, and we have Lincoln Riley, who's finally going to sweep the Cladiocrity out of the program, probably makes it so that a lot of people are excited. I know I'm excited to watch the spring game. I'm usually not excited to watch a spring game. So maybe we'll cap out higher than 20, but I'd be surprised. I think that's probably where it's going to be.
Well, okay, so we got one check mark here for 20,000. Eric, is it going to be 20 or more, or 20 or less? What do you think?
20,001. That's what I'm gonna.
Way to go out on a limb. That was good. That was good.
I
Mark,
think.
make note of that. Mark, make note of that. You might want to go to.
Are we playing the prices right? Or did we go there?
Kulkin's going to say 1. Yeah.
I got 420 on that, Chris.
All right, Eric, give us your take.
So I do think it'll be around there. I don't, talking about a sellout or things like that. I think I don't. It's just the way spring games are at USC in Los Angeles. I think it'll be telling to see how USC does at kind of distributing tickets to the community, local high schools, especially. I mean, up and down the state, in terms of high school teams being able to come and juice the numbers up a little bit. The idea to make it free, the idea to put it on ESPN, I think everything USC has done leading up to this spring game has been a good idea and will result in a better crowd and more excitement around this game. Chris talked a lot about kind of this being a USC infomercial. At this point, when USC acts like it wants to be good at football, it's one of those things now where until you are there, you kind of dress for the job you want, right? You want ESPN at your spring game, you want a full crowd, you act like that's going to happen. And so when USC is on kind of when it's ascending, as it feels like right now, we talk a lot about local high school coaches want to send their players to USC. They want USC to be good. National, journalists and people who cover the sport, they want USC to be good. They want Florida State to be good. And everyone talks about like, oh, you hate my team, you hate my team. They want to talk about the big teams. They want to talk about Ohio State being good and Alabama being good. USC absolutely is one of those. So yes, giving ESPN this game or having ESPN cover this game, they're going to be all fawning all over kind of Lincoln Riley and USC. And is this the birth of another Pete Carroll run? And yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of positivity about USC. And I think, Lincoln Riley is smart enough to know he's got the keys to kind of how this game looks, right? You can figure out if you want to push offense, if you want to push defense, if you want to do kind of anything like that, you can highlight certain guys and you can control the narrative a little bit, even though, yeah, I do believe him when he says we're going to go out and hit, we're going to play football. But yeah, I think everything USC has done in building up this game and pushing it and trying to get some eyes on it is a good thing. And I think Lincoln Riley's right when he kind of said, we know what fans expect from us, but at a big time if you're going to be a big time football program, there have to be expectations of fans too. And so for him to kind of toss that out there a little bit, I thought was pretty telling when he says, hey, yeah, we've got an expectation for it to be kind of a raucous, exciting environment for us to play our spring game in. And that absolutely puts the onus on USC fans to show up on Saturday.
Okay, is the fans going to show up, Mark? I know you've written about this a little bit or challenged the fans yourself. What's going to happen on Saturday? How many seats?
Well, first of all, it's a great decision. Whether or not keeping the fans or the family away during practice, that's debatable. Obviously the family is going to go out there. The recruits and high school coaches, they're showing up to the spring practices. So that energy level is out there. So great decision. I think with that little extra challenge from Lincoln Riley that Erik was just talking about there, I think we're going to see, closer to 30,000. I'll throw it out there. I really think that number is going to be much larger. It's because people who remember those Pete Carroll Halcyon days, they remember, the In-N-Out food truck, and then as soon as the game was over, running out to the field and standing in long lines to get autographs. So if the fans have that kind of passion again, hopefully, I think you're going to see 30,000 fans out there. And if you get the right camera angles, ESPN will get it right. It'll look good on TV, and that'll just generate more enthusiasm for the regular season, as soon as it gets here. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a good day.
Well, I thought it was interesting. We know it's on TV. We know the Coliseum holds 77,500. And I believe I might be off by a couple of 1,000 here or there. I think there's 15,000 t-shirts that are going to be put on the north sideline, which means, as we know, that's where they point the cameras to. So they'll, like Mark said, they can concentrate. They can make it look like there's a lot of people there. I think that one of the areas that I think that I am a little concerned about this hype because Southern California crowds are not like Tuscaloosa, Alabama. They're not like Columbus, Ohio, where they're going to pack 100,000 people in there, and people are going to go, "Oh, look at that!" Let's take Mark's 30,000 optimistic view and say that's what it is. They're still going to look and say, "Well, look at not that many people." But for those of us that have lived here, have grown up here, we know that 30,000 would be a good turnout, especially the way the weather is now. For those of you that are huddled in there and still freezing your buns off in the Midwest and the Northeast and so on and so forth. We've had wonderful weather after a recent really hot spell, and 70 degrees and sunny, I think, is kind of the prediction for Saturday. So plus people can tape the game if they want. So it may not be indicative of the true enthusiasm by just butts and seats. I think that Lincoln Riley did the right thing, challenging people to come. I don't know whether he needs to make an adjustment, though, that if there is 20,001 people there, whether he would be disappointed. I don't think I would be disappointed because I think I know what they're dealing with. Couple areas, though, about the attendance. When they sent out the release, they said, get your tickets, that season ticket holders are going to get free tickets, right? Okay, they do that every year, right? Excuse me. But I was concerned that they had a little spot on the release that said, if you're interested in complimentary tickets, sign in here. So I went to it and I saw that, you have to ask for tickets, then you got to download it. And I don't know how many people are really going to want to do that or even pay attention to it. What happens if somebody just shows up and says, hey, I heard the scrimmage was for free. Can I get in? What are they going to say? Do you have a ticket? And I think that could be a kind of a real concern to me when you're trying to keep everything positive. And also, I'm kind of curious about whether players that aren't gold plated and whether they're going to just trot out on the field on cameras, and some of them are going to have their stickers on, or whether everybody's going to have their stickers on, or some guys aren't. That, Lincoln Riley said in the regular, and that's not going to happen, probably, or not on the team. But what's going to happen in spring ball? I think that's kind of a curious thing to me. Also, what I thought was curious, I got a thing from UCLA that said on Saturday they're having their spring game, and it's also free, which I don't know if it was a coincidence, but unfortunately it's 9 o'clock in the morning. So I'm not surprised they should be paying fans to show up at the Rose Bowl rather than just say it's free.
You're on
So
the
I think
UCLA football mailing list, Greg?
Yes,
that
I
happen?
am. What's that?
How did that happen?
It happens because I always like to know what the other guy is doing.
Okay. Even if the other guy's UCLA football?
What do I care? I get Notre Dame. I get everybody. It's kind of like, you want to see film of your opponent. You want to see what they're going to do and how they're looking at things. Okay, Chris is lips
the
are
right-
moving. Here they come.
No,
Here
no,
come the
no.
words. Here come the words.
When
Fired up.
is Rice's spring game? Are you on their mailing list?
It's funny you should ask. I am actually on Rice's spring list.
Have they had their spring game already? How'd it go?
You know what? You live in Dallas, or is it Fort Worth?
I live in Dallas, but Rice isn't in Dallas.
Where's Rice located?
I think it's close to Houston, right?
Wait a
Are you in
minute.
Houston?
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yes.
No.
Yes. Rice is very close to Houston.
Well, I think that answers your question.
I don't even know why I asked the question.
I don't know why you asked it
But
either.
I'm pretty sure that
I'm
was
waiting
an
for Greg to break down the UCLA spring game right now. Isn't that what we're waiting for?
Well,
think
it's
so.
it's a real
And
possibility.
McKinney's dressed for it. He's got the UCLA blue on.
Wait
it.
a minute. That is a good point, Arledge. I mean,
Thank you.
Eric, is there a logo that you're covering up or something?
Wow, did that deflect quickly?
Is he a closet Bruin?
Hey, Notre Dame's spring game is coming up this Saturday too, Greg. We could do a triple header.
We need a show that's going to review all the spring games. No doubt about that. All right. I think we've exhausted that. Let's go to, before the second half, remind fans that you're watching or listening to WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle. This week's WeAreSC panelists include Marc Kulkin, Chris Arledge, Erik McKinney, and I'm Greg Katz. A programming note, again, we will review the spring game next Tuesday. We all encourage you to check it out and compare what you thought from what we thought. Also, a reminder, we encourage you to check out WeAreSC.com's subscription. Of course, WeAreSC.com is part of the On3 network. We invite you to become a subscriber to the best coverage of USC football and Trojans athletics. As a bonus for the curious, there's currently a special spring practice WeAreSC free trial, including monthly or yearly discount options to view our exclusive On3 Plus content, which includes analysis, breaking stories, data for USC football and basketball, and the balance of USC athletics. All right, third quarter. All right, we kick off the second half of the third quarter with this panel. As mentioned in the opening tease of Inside the Trojans Huddle, it's possible that 3 former starting Cardinal and Gold quarterbacks will be starting for 3 other universities in 2022. When you consider JT Daniels at West Virginia, Keaton Slovis at Pittsburgh, and Jackson Dart at Mississippi. In fact, it's entirely possible, as we mentioned earlier, that Slovis and Pitt, Daniels and West Virginia could actually face each other on Thursday, September 1st at Heinz Field in Pittsburgh for what is called the Backyard Brawl. Now, to add a little spice to the Backyard Brawl between Pitt and West Virginia, let's remember that the new West Virginia offensive coordinator is Graham Harrell, who mentored both Slovis and Daniels when they were both at USC. Now, panel, here is your question. Your overall thoughts on these 3 intriguing quarterback developments and the Graham Harrell connection. Is there an underlying message that we're missing on this, Marc Kulkin?
I don't know. I think it's going to be fun to watch when Pitt and West Virginia play each other. The way that Graham Harrell handled that whole quarterback situation, publicly, behind the scenes, it's a curious landing spot for JT. That's all I'm going to say on that. Is Graham Harrell looking to say, I'm the guy who made the quarterback? Is he? It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. As far as Jackson Dart at going down to Mississippi, I think that's a perfect place for him. I think Lane Kiffin will utilize his skill set perfectly. What it says is USC has an eye for quarterback talent. If they're not going to make it here, they'll make it somewhere else. So I guess that's one takeaway. USC will never be void of a quarterback. They might need another one right now on their roster just because they're short as far as number wise, but USC is always going to be a place to play quarterback. And if you're not willing to wait, you've got ex-offensive coordinators willing to give you a second and third opportunity. And you got plenty of programs out there willing to give you an opportunity. But as far as what to take away from it, I don't know. Other than let's watch that first game when Pitt and West Virginia play each other.
Chris, do you think, in your opinion, that the quarterback situation under Helton was totally mangled, mismanaged? You know, one player we're leaving out is going to be Bryce Young at Alabama. He was a USC commit. So he wasn't, of course, a quarterback at USC, but he was a really strong commitment up to one point. What transpired in the Helton years with all these quarterbacks? What's your viewpoint on it?
I think your original question was whether I think the quarterback situation under Helton was badly mangled. I think you could replace quarterback with any other adjective, and I would say yes to that. The guy was a disaster. My biggest takeaway is that West Virginia must not have scouted USC football. Somebody in West Virginia thought, we need some offensive help. Who can we go out who's really going to turn this thing around? And they decided Graham Harrell was the guy. That is mind-boggling to me. Don't they have televisions in West Virginia? I mean, couldn't somebody maybe they still have VHS. Couldn't somebody stuck a VHS tape in there and watched Graham Harrell's offense? I mean, that's shocking to me. If I were West Virginia's athletic director, I would fire the West Virginia coach, whoever he is, as soon as he hired Graham Harrell. It's crazy. The only thing that disappoints me is that Pittsburgh didn't hire either T. Martin or Hugh Jackson to be their offensive coordinator, because then we could have really a clash of former USC quarterbacks and elite former USC offensive coordinators. That would have been exciting. Jackson Dart's going to have a good season. JT Daniels, he has 2 years to play, right? So he can still get to his fourth school. I think JT Daniels will probably transfer to Marshall for his senior season. And Graham Harrell will get fired after 2 years. It should be after 2 games. That's what I think.
Erik, why did JT pick Graham Harrell? I mean, knowing how that whole quarterback situation was handled, why would he go there?
So
Is that directed at Erik, right?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Erik, take it away.
So, I mean, I have not talked to JT Daniels to get any kind of thoughts or quotes from him since he left USC. What I will say, what this whole situation tells me is 3 things. It's one, what Marc alluded to, USC is a destination spot for talented quarterbacks. Good quarterbacks want to play at USC. They're going to end up here, absolutely. The other thing that it tells me is that the transfer portal makes it really easy for guys to pick up and leave whenever they want to go somewhere. And I think ultimately that is a good thing for players to be able to go find a spot where they want to play. The third thing it tells me is that a lot of these guys involved in here, what we're talking about, they understand this is a business and they're making business decisions, and any kind of feelings or whatever or anything like that they're going to try to go to where they feel set up the best. With JT Daniels, there's some familiarity, I think, with Graham Harrell. He understands what he's going to ask. He understands that when he's stepping into this is what I'm going to be able to do. This is how quickly I think I can make an impact there and play. When Keaton Slovis goes to Pitt, he just saw what the Pitt quarterback did and the numbers that he was able to put up. And so I think that becomes kind of a comfortable landing spot for him. I like you guys talked about, I think that's fun. It's going to be a fun thing to watch these 2 guys play. Yeah, I think it's interesting that JT Daniels and Graham Harrell got together when there was clearly so much kind of, I don't know what the word is exactly, but there was a lean. There was a lean to Keaton Slovis. They found Keaton Slovis. They really liked him. They wanted him to play. And I don't think while JT Daniels was on the roster, that Keaton Slovis ever really did anything for you to say, no, he's got to get out of here. We've got to bench him and bring JT Daniels back. And I think, like I mentioned, there's business decisions to be made now, and you've got to go with one guy. I don't think you could play multiple quarterbacks and say, yeah, we think both guys are equal and we're going to throw them both out there somehow. So decisions get made, and that's how I think Keaton Slovis ended up being the guy. But JT Daniels knows now, he went to Georgia and all of a sudden there's a walk-on that's starting ahead of him. He knows he's got to figure out, what's the best for me. And I don't think he can carry anything with him in doing that. I think he's got to look forward and try to find the best spot for him. And, you guys mentioned Graham Harrell kind of landing there. It'll definitely be interesting to see how he does at West Virginia under Chris. Here you go, Neil Brown, the head coach at West Virginia. Neil Brown's got some Texas Tech background in him a little bit. He was.
I'm sure he'll be amazing there. He's really on the right track. Hey, do you think JT remembers all 4 plays, or do you think he's forgotten 1 or 2 of them?
I don't know how many he had to run in that first half that he played. It was right Fresno State, so they
completed 73% of it, whatever he did. So,
well, I just want to know whether he's going to have to spend 3 hours learning the Graham Harrell offense like the rest of the team, or whether he remembers all 4 plays already. I don't know, but that may be it. Maybe he didn't want to have to spend an afternoon learning the playbook.
I'm going to let that go.
Yeah.
All right, let me wrap this particular quarter up by saying that I think that if you're a quarterback, whether you go to SC or not, nothing is guaranteed. The transfer portal isn't out for you if you want. I thought it was curious this week that Spencer Rattler, who played for Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, was ripping on Riley, saying things weren't good. And yeah. And so, he's Rattler's now at South Carolina and says, this is the right program for me. And, it's a difficult thing in this day and age to make quarterbacks happy. I will say this as far as the USC situation was, I think that a fish rots from the head down. And as bad as I thought that Graham Harrell was, and I think he was bad, naive, might have been a nice quarterback as a player himself. I have to say that Clay Helton, it all falls back on Clay Helton and his ability to manage his program. I thought he horribly did it, like almost everybody in the world does. And, who I think one of the questions that you can always ask yourself again is, if Lincoln Riley had been around when these quarterbacks were at SC, would he have recruited them? And how much would they have developed? And would you have seen all these players literally go other places? Would Bryce Young even be at Alabama today? I don't think so. A lot happens in the change of a head coach. And I think we're going to find out just exactly from here on out at SC how they're going to be looking at quarterbacks. Obviously, they're going after the best of the best. Malachi Nelson's coming in. How will that be treated with Caleb Williams already going to be there? Who's going to be in between those guys? It's going to be very interesting to see how the quarterback situation is handled. So with that, we're going to move on here. Now, as always, we begin the fourth quarter with the symbolic lighting of the Chris Arledge. We have called it the Chris Arledge lighting of the torch.
Oh, look, it even made it into the screen this week. Last week,
it's the background.
Get up above the bottom black bar there.
Wait,
Yeah.
Who's the we in that sentence? That we've been calling it the Chris Arledge candle or whatever you're talking about. Who's the we?
Greg is a candle.
I'm glad you asked
said
that.
it.
I would like to answer that question. When I say we, I'm talking about me, myself, and I. Now, in lieu of the traditional USC marching band's rendition of the William Tell Overture, we bring you Inside the Huddle's version of Musings with Arledge with Chris Arledge. So, Chris, it's all yours, buddy.
Thank you, sir. Some of the biggest names in college football coaching are unhappy. What once was hidden and prohibited is now out in the open. Players are making money, in some cases a lot of money, and not everybody's happy about it. Dabo Swinney just recently said that the whole college football system needs to be blown up, in part because of NIL. Now listen to the way he describes this whole name, image, and likeness situation. Quote, There's no rules, no guidance, no nothing. It's out of control. It's not sustainable. It's an absolute mess and a train wreck. And the kids are going to be the ones who suffer in the end. There are going to be a lot of kids that end up with no degrees and make decisions based on the wrong things. That's from Dabo. I want to unpack that a little bit because I'm wondering whether that's really what's driving Dabo Swinney's anger. I mean, kids make a lot of decisions based on a lot of different things. A lot of them don't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. I mean, who your position coach is probably isn't the best way to decide on your college unless you're going to, unless that guarantees you a future at the NFL. You have kids making decisions based on game day atmosphere. I'm not sure that's the best thing to make your decision based on. I mean, look, if the NCAA was determined not to let kids make bad college decisions, they should probably tell kids you can't turn down a scholarship offer from Northwestern or from Cal to go to Oregon or Arizona State, but we let that happen. I don't think that's what's really driving this. Dabo says there are no rules. Lincoln Riley actually made a similar statement. Lincoln said, a lot of people voiced concerns when NIL came up, that there had to be a plan for that. And instead, we instituted NIL without any plan for that. So that's why we're at where we're at. Who instituted NIL? Dabo says there are no rules. Lincoln Riley says there was no plan. There were rules. There was a plan. And everybody with any authority in college football agreed on those rules in that plan. This is what they all wanted. They wanted the schools to make hundreds of millions of dollars. They wanted Dabo Swinney and Lincoln Riley to become millionaires. They wanted Kirk Herbstreit to buy a mansion. And they wanted the star quarterback that helps generate millions of dollars to get nothing. Those were the rules. That was the plan. These coaches talk like the NCAA decided to make a change and they just didn't think through it carefully enough. That's not what happened. The schools fought for years to keep players from making anything. And the problem is that those rules were unlawful. And while the NCAA fought hard, the courts have finally said no. And it's not just that the courts have allowed NIL. The courts are soon going to allow just about anything that the players want. Listen to what Justice Kavanaugh of the U.S. Supreme Court said recently. The NCAA couches its arguments for not paying student athletes in innocuous labels, but the labels cannot disguise the reality. The NCAA's business model would be flatly illegal in almost any other industry in America. Look, let's be honest. The NCAA system is broken down and we have the NIL system we now have because the NCAA tried to keep all the money for the adults and not give any to the people who were performing. So now there are three options. The first one is legislation. The Congress could pass a law that sets NIL rules. This is what the schools badly want to have happen. Why? Because Congress is great at fixing things? Well, Congress's current approval rating, according to Gallup, is 21%, which is about 3 points higher than chlamydia. And frankly, I'm surprised it's that high. But the reason they want Congress to do something is because they hate the other two options. Option number two is collective bargaining. This is why the NFL can have a salary cap and the antitrust laws don't interfere. But to do that, the schools would have to make the players employees, which means they would actually have to share revenue with them, which they don't have to do under the current NIL rules. It's someone else's money. And in most major sports, the athletes are getting about 50% of the revenues. The colleges don't want that. So they certainly don't want to go the collective bargaining route. And to be fair, the players would then be covered by labor laws, which in a state like California is no joke. So I guess I don't really blame the universities wanting to avoid that. Option number three, don't worry about it. Let these guys make what they can make. They say people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. What about people in $17 million houses like Lincoln Riley? Is it really that offensive that a Texas offensive lineman gets paid $150,000 a year when Texas football brings in $150 million a year? Rich people donate money to Texas football all the time. It's encouraged. Why is that okay, but making a donation to the player is not? The Dabo Sweeneys of the world don't like it because NIL changes recruiting dramatically. And these are guys who benefit from the old rules. Dabo Swinney was a king under the old system. Why would he want anything to change? He is the very epitome of a status quo power. Some people claim that NIL gives some schools unfair advantages. Some schools always have unfair advantages. Before NIL, Purdue couldn't compete with Ohio State for players. They still can't. And don't tell me that NIL money makes education secondary. That's been the case for a very long time. There are some good college football student athletes who take advantage of the opportunity. But here's the dirty little secret. Every school brings in a lot of players that would not be able to hack it in the classroom if not for the fact that they were very big and very fast. And then you throw a bunch of tutors on those kids, you handpick majors, and you handpick classes to get them through. And the simple fact of the matter is that the more elite the school is, the bigger the difference is between the rest of the student body and the athletes that you bring in the major sports. So look, with a lot of these guys, this is their chance. They're probably not going to be NFL players, or they're not going to be NFL players for very long. If they're marginal students, they're still going to be marginal in terms of the job market when they get out of college. If that means that they have a chance to make $200K a year to play defensive tackle somewhere, great. Is there really an emergency we need to run out and fix? Dabo Sweeney thinks so. I don't see it. I'm done, Greg. I'm done.
We're just applauding you. That's the best we could do with our limited sound effects. So there you have it. Another Musings with Arledge. Greatly appreciated. We hope that you all enjoyed that little segment. So we begin the fourth quarter with this question. Panel, if you could change any rule for the upcoming NCAA football season in 2022, what rule or what part of the game on field would it be and why? Erik, is there any changes you'd like to see in the game?
You know, I've always had kind of an issue with offensive players being able to kind of, you know, especially now when there's so much effort on limiting head contact and spearing and targeting and all that kind of stuff, that offensive players can lower their head and initiate contact and that sort of thing. And it's okay. And a defensive player, we're at a point now where, boy, if they start to smell a helmet, they're out of the game. So evening that up a little bit, I think would be something that I would go for. I think kind of the offensive face mask where a running back stiff arms somebody, grabs a face mask and twists them. That's another thing where things shift to the offense. That being said, I don't want to ask NCAA officials to call anything else. So I'm sort of two minds where I'd like to see that even out a little bit. I'd also like officials to have, I don't know, just give 2 officials flags or something, how we can figure out cutting down penalties out there.
Okay, Mark, what do you want? What changes do you want?
I want to see the PI call changed. No longer is it just a 15-yard penalty. If it happens 35, 40 yards down the field, mark it. That's where it's going to happen. I think you'll start seeing defense play defense a little bit better rather than just, you know what, I'm going to take a penalty because it's only going to cost us 15 rather than a touchdown. So that for sure. Also, I think they need to make a change to the quarterback taking off and running. We're going to call it the Kenny Pickett rule, where, you know what, if you're going to be able to fake a slide, if you're a quarterback and you're 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, even if you start the slide, you're open game. No longer can you be protected. If you're going to pretend you're a runner and you're going to put on some dead leg type of move and try and fake out a defender, yeah, you're going to get hit. You're now a running back, in my opinion. So let's start with those 2.
Okay, Chris, what do you see? You're a defensive back. Would you like to see that rule changed?
I don't have a problem with Mark's proposed change if we're actually going to call pass interference on offensive players. I mean, offensive guys can mug defensive backs and it never gets called. It's outrageous. The only time they call it is if it's an illegal pick. But I mean, let's call this evenly. Let's get the defensive guy a fair shot at it. So I want to make that change. Number 2, I hate the way the targeting rule is called, at least in the Pac-12. You know what the targeting rule is called in the Pac-12? If it's a big hit, they throw the flag. Then they'll review it and see what happens. But it isn't even about leading with your head or hitting a guy in the head. If you hit a guy hard, they throw a flag. In fact, you know what? Forget that. I want the rule to be that we just fire all of the current Pac-12 referees and hire new people. That's the rule I'd like to see, because those guys are terrible. When you watch an SEC game, it's not that they don't sometimes have bad calls, but it is a completely different game. It is not a flag every play. They let guys play. They let the game be physical. The Pac-12 officiating is horrific. My last proposed rule change: you cannot punt the ball if you have crossed the 50-yard line. You cannot do it. And you can't try to get a false start or a delay of game penalty in order to go back behind the 50 to punt. You can't do that either. Once you cross the 50, you've got to go for it. I'm tired of watching coaches punt from the 41. It's nonsense. There may be times when you want to do that, but these guys are so risk averse. Go look at the stats, guys. It doesn't make sense. Run, go for it. Unless you're USC and it's a 4th and 1, and then you probably have to punt because you can't get it. Maybe we can this year.
You know, you just retired David Shaw.
Yeah, well, it may be time to retire David Shaw. The last few years of David Shaw have not been an exciting David Shaw, has it?
Where would Rick Neuheisel be without punting is winning?
I think he'd be right where he is right
In
now.
place. Yep.
Yeah. Or maybe he'd have another role at UCLA, and then Greg could fill us in when he gets his daily Bruin updates. I don't know.
Look at that smile. I made him happy. I tell you, it made my day.
I just love it that you follow UCLA football so carefully. You're the only person in the world that does.
Look, and I grew up, my dad was a UCLA fan, and I had to go sit. You know what it's like when your dad says, okay, the Bruins are playing today, and you've been going to all the SC games, and you have to sit next to your dad while he's standing up for Gary Beeman and all the other quarterbacks. And I'm just going, boy, this is worse than sitting in the corner. But I will just
overcome that.
Well, it wasn't easy, believe me.
Yeah.
I do want to say that I agree totally, Mark, and I won't belabor the points here, guys. I think the pass interference rule is ridiculous the way it is in college. I know that defensive back coaches, secondary coaches teach their players, we'll take a 15-yard penalty. It's a lot better than giving up 6 points. So I think it penalizes basically the offense for trying to throw deep. I mean, you could throw deep 3 times and get 3 straight pass interference calls, and you still haven't given up a touchdown. So
most of USC's opponents did that last year, by the way. Threw the ball 3 straight times and got 3 straight pass interference penalties. And you know what? It actually worked out okay for him, Greg.
You know, you make a good solid point. I like that. All right, let's move on, guys. We're going into overtime. Questions and answers. Panel, you have a free-for-all answer format. You can jump in when you think you have a quick answer to any of these. By the way, if viewers or listeners would like to submit a question that we can answer or give you our opinion, just go to either the Gary P or WeRSC members message board at wersc.com. From there, you'll see the topic thread regarding questions for Inside the Trojans Huddle. All right, question number 1. It's all about timing here. From SC1 MBA, we all know that Scott Schrader, who of course is WeRSC's recruiting guru, is related to the great Lowell Schrader, the late Hall of Fame Long Beach Press-Telegram columnist. The question by SC1 is Chris, referring to Arledge, related to the great Rune Arledge? Chris, can you definitely tell us the answer to that question?
Well, he must be a distant relation because there are very few Arledges. There are lots of Aldridges, and the reason that there are very few Arledges is because at some point in that family tree, there was a guy who didn't know how to spell Aldridge, and he spelled it wrong, and we became the Arledges. So Rune must be some sort of relative, but it's a distant enough relative that I don't really know how he fits in. And I can say that my family comes from a long line of very poor farmers in Oklahoma and other parts of the South. So I don't know Rune, and I'd like to say that that he's my uncle, but I can't, at least not honestly.
So let me ask you this question, and we're gonna move on to the second question. You said it could be a derivative of Aldridge, right?
It is, yeah, no question.
Who's the most famous USC football player whose last name was Aldridge?
I don't know.
Well, I'm glad you asked. The
didn't.
most famous one is Ricky Aldridge, who kicked the extra point, which was the winning point in the famous 1967 USC versus UCLA football game.
Was Ricky Aldridge an Orange County guy?
I believe he was.
You know?
I think he might have been at Westminster High School.
I think so. I think in the late 60s, maybe.
Correct.
Yeah, I think my dad played against him. My dad was at Fountain Valley. So I guess I should have come up with that answer.
So for all the Fountain Valley people, since we also believe we're kind of a resource here. Your father's name was, and he played what position for, I think you told me Bruce Pickford?
Bruce Pickford, yeah. Keith Arledge, he played outside linebacker for Bruce Pickford.
And
Yeah.
what years did he actually play? Do you know what years your dad played at Fountain Valley?
Yeah, he graduated in 69. His first year was at Marina High School. His class was the first one when Fountain Valley opened. They moved some of the kids from Marina to Fountain Valley. So yeah, he was a Fountain Valley guy, and that was before Edison was around.
Yeah, I think Edison came around 1971, 72 in that era.
Yeah.
All right, question number 2 from the Lizard King in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Will USC have a 1,000-yard rusher for 2022?
Yes.
What say ye? Yes? No?
Yes.
Mark says yes. Who?
Will they have 2?
Okay, you think 2?
Will they have 2 should be the question.
Okay, well, will they have 2 then?
They'll have 1. It'll be Travis Dye, but Austin Jones will be close.
That's that'd be my answer also. Yeah, I think Dye will get there. They're talking about, they like all 3 of them, and Darlon Barlow has had a good spring. I could see it shaking out with a top 2 at some point. I wanted to say no, they won't have one because Caleb Williams is going to run. Travis Dye is going to catch a bunch of passes. Austin Jones is going to catch a bunch of passes. But boy, this offense runs the ball, and I think that they're going to make a point to try to get someone to 1,000. Plus, you're going to have at least 1 more game than you had last year, hopefully. So you got some extra snaps there.
I think they'll have a 1,000-yard rusher. I think it'll be Travis Dye if he is the starter. That's how I view it. So yes, I think we all would agree there's going to be a 1,000-yard starter.
You think he may not start? You think he may not start?
Who's that? Travis Dye?
Yeah. You think Austin Jones might start?
I get mixed messages now because, we all know that Caleb's going to start at quarterback, but yet we hear that Miller Moss is looking fantastic, but I don't think anybody's going to run out and make a bet that Caleb Williams isn't going to be the starter. I look at the situation with Travis Dye and Austin Jones, and I feel that Dye is going to start, but it seems to me that it's kind of the same situation as the quarterback situation. I think Dye is going to get it. That doesn't mean he's going to carry the ball way more than Austin Jones, but I think that he'll be right there in the mix. Definitely will be in the mix. And Barlow, who knows with Barlow? He might surprise everybody. We don't know who's going to get injured. So, that's another, thing that could happen. All right. Final question, guys. Is the term gold plating policy, this is from Corona Trojan fan. I assume this is in Corona, California. Is the team's gold plating policy going to go into effect for the spring game where gold plated players will have the Trojans logo on their helmet and others will, or will all the players have the logo in order to show team unity for ESPN viewers? Now, we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. I think I brought this up, but how do you think? Are we going to see a mixed bag here, mixed helmets, or are we going to see all of them wearing gold-plated logos on the side of their helmets? What say ye?
I think it's going to be interesting if you're going to see the side of anybody's helmet at all. The offensive linemen, the defensive linemen, the tight ends, the running backs, they wear these kind of extra foam pads on the outside of their helmets just to kind of absorb hits and that sort of thing. I don't know for certain that they won't be wearing those at the game. They seem to wear them. We see videos and photos and stuff of the team portions and the scrimmage parts, and they seem to wear them for that. That being said, we've seen walk-on kickers get gold-plated. We've seen walk-on receivers get gold-plated. I would be surprised, and it's kind of, you've seen more and more as the spring has progressed. I think they kind of trickled out early, and then you had days where 5, 6, 7 guys would pick them up. I'd be surprised if we got to Saturday and everyone who is going to go out there on Saturday didn't have them. That's sort of my take. Again, not that there were guys on Thursday that maybe you thought would have gotten them by now that still don't have them. I think different position groups need to hit different things. You got different, coaches that want to send messages or do things different ways. I'd be surprised if anybody came out on Saturday without having earned that by your last practice of the spring. But that's my take. I don't know for certain that Lincoln Riley wouldn't send somebody out there without it.
Who's that guy for the Buffalo Bills years ago that used to wear one of those big things on his head? You remember this? Kelso,
the special teams guy.
Yeah.
Was it the mascot? Was it just a giant?
No. He put on a special protective.
I think it may have been the mascot, Chris.
It was not a mascot. He was playing in the NFL for the Buffalo Bills, and he wore that on his head.
Stephen Trask.
No, I was thinking Kelso. Is that right? Kelso? We'll have to look that up.
Yeah. He put on a special helmet that had extra padding on it.
Yeah, I mean, this is old technology. I'm surprised that people haven't been doing it since then. But I'll weigh in on this. Let's put it this way: if you've been healthy and you've been practicing, and by the time of the spring game you don't have that decal on your helmet, you should skip the spring game and go do the paperwork for the transfer portal, because the coaches are telling you all you need to know. If you haven't earned it by then you're out. You're out.
I think it was Stephen Tasker, I think is
Tasker.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to exactly what you and Eric are talking about. Yeah. If you don't have your gold plates, you're going to have the red foam on top of your helmet. And that's probably a good indication that, you know what, we'll look for that pink slip in your locker when spring camp's over as well, because you're probably one of those few that are going to be encouraged to consider other options. You've had an entire spring camp to earn that gold plate. If you don't have it by now, they're sending a message to you.
Well, these are going to be intriguing questions. One final thought here. Are we going to have a depth chart announced at the conclusion of Saturday? Have you heard anything about a depth chart?
Or
I don't know how often Lincoln Riley is going to tip his hand on anything in terms of playing time or starters or things of that nature.
Yeah.
But no,
I think Caleb Williams will be at the top of the depth chart at quarterback, though. I feel comfortable with that.
It's a guess.
I think we know who the starting quarterback will be, what the starting offensive line will be that they trot out there on Saturday. And we have a pretty good idea of who your starting running backs will be on offense. Outside of that, wide receiver and tight end is really the question mark. Who's going to be the starters?
Yeah, I think Malcolm Epps talked about like he's kind of running Y and Jude Wolf is running that H spot. But the wide receiver position for me is, I think, as wide open as it gets. We've heard really good things about Brendan Rice. Obviously, Mario Williams, you assume, has that leg up coming in. And then Gary Bryant of the guys staying, you'd think he jumps to the front, although he's dealing with a bit of an injury here the last few practices. But no, if you told me that any receiver would go out there during the spring game and have a big game, I'd believe you. There's a lot of talent there, and you've heard and seen flashes from a lot of those guys. For me, that's kind of the most, I guess, volatile position in terms of who ends up starting, who ends up kind of contributing a lot. And Lincoln Riley's talked about, rolling 8-9 guys through at those spots. I've talked about, I don't think it's a great thing if you're counting on big contributions from 8 guys. But I think at this point in the spring, you're thinking, yeah, anybody could kind of jump up there.
All right, well, guys, plenty of intrigue to find out what the answers are to a lot of these questions. Hopefully we'll find out a lot about it after spring ball. So that's going to be a wrap for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. A reminder once again, next week we'll review the spring game as well as related USC and selected college football topics. So until then, big thank you to this week's panel of Marc Kulkin, Chris Arledge, and Erik McKinney, and a special thank you to all of you watching or listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Till next Tuesday, this is your host, Greg Katz, reminding you all to fight on, everybody.